31 here. I see a lot of attendees are coming back on. I did miss at the very beginning. I do want to thank Epic Lacrosse, the equipment manufacturer, came on board as a sponsor of this on very last minute notice. We're going to have some swag to send out to all of our panelists. So make sure you get your addresses into Bruce. We'll get that out to you. I'll get Darren his Grizzly sweater at the same time. So I don't get any more. All right, so I want to focus. We got a question here I want to discuss from the last session, and it's from Scott Browning. Says, where does leadership, and this is going back to our discussion on the proper coaching ethics, recreation, competitive, whatever it is. Where does leadership come from to affect the change that we've discussed, and is the leadership there organizationally? So let's just focus on maybe where does the leadership, where does that change start? And Darren, maybe I'll go to you first, and then we can go up to Glenn and over to Paul on that.
Sure. I think the most likely one would be through our Coaches Association. We typically at provincial tournaments for sure, but in some tournaments that happen throughout the year, we're getting officials there to watch games for offense, defense, and things of that nature. So the direction, unfortunately, just like parent-teacher conferences, it's the people that we need to talk to that don't come on to calls like this. The challenge moving forward is that we have great ideas. We need to get the word out there. We need to be the change, but there are many people that are either ignorant by choice or are very set in their ways and don't understand kind of the logic behind things.
Coach Clark.
I mean, it's a bit of a numbers game too. I think it's hard because, I mean, each organization, if you could have sort of this coach mentoring program, that would be ideal, but some organizations are smaller, they don't have the resources, so it's difficult. I mean, I think it's incumbent on everybody, that is educated in the game, and I don't mean that, I just, in terms of has a lot of experience, to try and provide some mentoring. I mean, I know my sons played in Markham lacrosse growing up, which was a real small spot. And we would try and set up coaching. Jimmy Veltman and I coached in that organization, and we would set up sort of coach mentoring clinics kind of thing to just, help with skill development. What are some of the teaching points for age and stage, and have those things in place? And you want to model good behavior, but it's difficult to reach everybody. So it's something that's a collective initiative, but it's hard. It's hard when you don't have the numbers in certain organizations.
Coach Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the question, Russ, I'm not sure, maybe you could probably clarify that, but I think the question is also about how we make the change to make the game more maybe nonviolent. I think that's part of the question is, where does that leadership come? Is that correct, Russ? Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, the question was, we've discussed this change. How do we get it from a discussion point to actual change? Where's the, is it an organizational change? And if so, how do we get that organization to make those changes?
Yeah, and I think, Clarkie's lived through this. I'm kind of new. It's funny, I'm new to minor lacrosse and I guess the politics, or I understand, but you said it before, if Hockey Canada can do it because of US Hockey made their game better. And, obviously my little guy plays hockey now. He played 4-on-4 half ice. We've kind of went development. We've taken that to make our game better, and it's great. So us, I think, as a country, the CLA obviously has to kind of take the leadership role, I would think, and everybody follow from there. And I understand that politically, organizations or what do you call it, MLAs? I'm not even sure. Whatever you guys call them, don't all get along. But at the end of the day, if the CLA says, like Hockey Canada, this is going to make our game better, it's going to grow our game, and we're going to take the violence out of it, and here's the rules, and let's all abide by that. I think that's really where it starts. But hey, listen, I would love to just do whatever I could to make this game better. And I know Clarkie's been through this. He's tried to change it, and it hasn't happened. But it's 2021, and I think it's it's time. And Eddie Como, Derek Keenan, all of us, we talk about this all the time. And we, maybe it's us that has to say, hey, listen, this is wrong. And, if some knuckle dragger thinks it's right, unfortunately, it might have been good in the 80s when we played, but it's not right anymore. So maybe we'll have to.
Yeah, and I think it's, I think conferences like this, national conferences, seeing a lot of the provinces come together to go through these topics is going to be a huge help. I'll say a last comment here that we got posted by somebody saying one of the confusing things, and I don't disagree with this, is the fact that we have a long-term athlete development plan that has basically 3 tiers to it. It's very confusing for a lot of groups. You might be in a small town somewhere and they play one version of the game, and then you go to a more profound area and they play full hitting everywhere at novice. So, I think it's a really good point. But let's move on. Let's talk about referees and coaches together. And I'm going to start with the referees on this. I'll start with Lee because I've picked on Ian a few times, and I'll probably pick on him a few more. We've got coaches, we've got referees. It's not just our sport. It's a lot of sports in which referees are involved. But we have a sport that is very fast, it's very physical, and it's very emotional. What are the problems when we talk about referees and coaches meshing together? What do you think the problems are in our game right now, Lee? And then we'll go to Ian.
Well, I mean, the hot topic as always is the abuse. That is one of the problems, and will be a bit of an ongoing problem until it resolves itself. And again, it's not, and I said this to Russ at some of our local sessions here, it's not coaches to officials. Officials can be equally as guilty as the abuse. I call it the reverse abuse. If the official doesn't want to be addressed in that manner, he or she should not be addressing the coaches or the players in the same manner. It's just the respect's got to go both ways.
Go ahead, Ian.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that it becomes easier when you do have that mutual respect. Obviously, Russ, you and I go way back to playing days, but as coach and referee, we've had lots of discussions, but there's a level of respect there, because I think one of the things that we as referees understand, the competitive fire of a coach in the moment. I think as soon as things get personal, obviously that's a line that gets crossed and things like that. But I think that for us as referees, developing relationships with coaches, especially the ones that we see on a regular basis, is really important. You can't withdraw. If you think about that relationship as a bank account, if you got nothing to withdraw from that bank account when you need it, then you don't have anything to work with. And so you got to put something in the bank account. And so that can start with your meeting with the coach right off the bat. Hey, coach, how you doing today? And you start with that, sort of respectful banter right off the bat. But then it's the little moments that you have within the game. Can you answer a question on the fly or at a timeout, or answer some question for them that's going to help them to understand that you're listening, you hear them, you may not agree or they might not agree, but you can quickly explain, hey, this is what I saw. Might not be what you saw, but we had different angles. Maybe I missed one, those kinds of things. That ability to communicate, I think, is huge. It's something that referees have to work all the time to develop. Some are better at it than others, no question. Some people are real hands off. They don't want to talk to coaches. They put a wall up, and I don't know that that's really helpful. And then from the flip side, some coaches, they spend all their time coaching the referees. And that's where I find we get into an issue is, when I'm watching the game and I see things that if you were watching as a coach, if you were watching what I was doing less and more watching the play, you'd know that that one defenseman is weak on his left side, and if you attack that with a screen, you'll score every time. But you don't see that because you're yelling at me that I missed the push on the back. You know, you're busy coaching me, and you're missing all the stuff that's going on. And you know, I got no problem with having a heated conversation with a coach that's upset about, you know, something that he thinks I missed. But it's way easier to have that conversation when I'm not hearing it about every single call made or missed all the way up the field or the floor. That for me is a big one.
Yeah, I just want to add, one of the issues I've always had with Ian is that he's quicker on his feet than me in a game. So anytime I want to take a jab at him, I usually eat it pretty quickly. Sorry, Lee, were you adding something there?
Yeah, so yeah, just as the officials, I mean, it's the game officials really don't have a horse in the race. But when that emotion gets going in the game, and there's going to be emotion with the players and coaches, the referees need to keep it cool and even, and that's a difficult skill to teach. It's an unteachable skill. And again, it just goes back to the first session where it's on the job training. It's something that referees need to practice is keeping their cool, calm demeanor in a game.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Coach Day. Same thing, really focusing on, as a coach, what you think the problems are between the coaches and referees right now. And then we'll go to Coach Clark and Coach Fridge.
Yeah, I think Ian really said it there. It's great. I love when, you know, in minor lacrosse, when the ref comes over and, you know, they talk to you before the game, and, you know, and they, you know, it's great when they say, hey, like, hey, coach, you know, what's been going on in your games? What do you see? What's kind of an issue or whatever? And they do that in the National Lacrosse League where, you know, every game, 3 guys come shake your hand, you talk, and that just that little kind of introduction. Even though in the pro league, we already know the guys, and they'll usually say, hey, listen, our focus this week is whatever, off ball slash. You know, it's funny, the Man Cup in New West in 2017, they said before the tournament, hey, no off ball slash before the tournament. We tell our guys, hey, no off ball slash. I love that because I hate the off ball slash. And it was like clean because there was no off ball slash. But that little communication from a ref to a coach before is huge. It kind of really helps. And then, like I said before, in minor lacrosse, the refs are the best coaches during the game, coaching the kids on the floor, always talking to them. And that's kind of really the biggest thing I appreciate. And it's like, you know, relationship building and everything, like between us and our players, between you and your families, the people you work with. That's, you know, the most successful people can build those relationships. And I think that's no different than from the coaches to the referees. And I love in the NL, we'll be in a hotel and Ian Garrison or someone will come up and he'll talk about a play from other games, show me video. What do you think about that? I'm like, oh, that's a tough one. Like, that's kind of how far the relationships have come. And me, you know, straight up, me in the 90s or 2000s, not good with refs, but you know, I totally appreciate, you know, how far everybody has come. And, you know, and I said this off before we started, like, the refereeing in lacrosse right now is the best it's ever been. So, I mean, I think that's one thing we really have to kind of appreciate and really, you know, mentor that as coaches. And that's what I try to say to Brien Lemon, our league, is we got to get these guys who are playing senior B, jump in and be, they're not going to make it to the NLL as players, but they're 25 years old. Let's get those guys to be the next pro refs, the next junior refs, the next senior refs. Those are the guys that know the game. Guys or girls, and those are the people that we have to mentor to you know, to continue being great ambassadors.
Perfect. Coach Clark?
Agree with all those points. I would say the communication, I think refs can communicate themselves out of a lot of problems. And I mean, it's constant dialogue on the floor. They can solve problems on the floor by talking to players as they go in for a loose ball, stay off his back. There's all those mini conversations that happen during a game that can help the referee. And I think perception as well. You know, if you're engaged in the game as an official and you're dialoguing and you're talking, it gives the impression that you care, you're engaged, you're professional, you know, you're invested in being the best that you can be. And I think it diffuses a lot of disagreement with coaches and refs when you have somebody that's engaged and looks like they're being professional about it. And I'll tell you a quick story. It was an NLL story, and one of my assistant coaches was really having it with one of the referees, and you know, just for whatever reason thought he was having a bad game, thought he made a bunch of bad calls, and they were having a little issue. And it was actually on the flight home. The referee was a seat in front of him, and he watched this guy on his iPad going through every one of his calls, making notes, seeing what he would do differently, all those kinds of things. So it's along the same lines of engagement and professionalism. It diffused that situation, because whether he disagreed or agreed with him, he knew he was being professional. He knew he was taking pride in his craft. He knew he was doing the things he could do to be better. And I think when you project that image with communication on the floor, communication with the coaches, body language, perception, I think that helps diffuse a lot of potential situations and problems that occur.
Coach Fridge?
Yeah, the communication part's been said. I think the farther you get from your playing days, the calmer you get. Lee may disagree with me right now, but a lot of the frustration, I think, comes down to like conflict resolution skills, or like there's a certain pathway that an official can take to avoid talking to a player, send them first to the penalty box, or like a C path around. You're either going to engage and kind of set the terms where you're going to say, look, I'm going to talk to you if you're calm, but the moment you raise your voice, I think that changes everything as far as bringing everybody down or bringing that person down. I am all for warning. There are coaches out there that will push until they get told, but you know, that's the last one. Next time you get dinged, and then make sure you ding them when they do cross that boundary or go too far. You know, things get accelerated sometimes when, you know, the score is really close. It's a highly competitive game. You feel like you're being jobbed because you got like 3 or 4 penalties in a row. So, I mean, I've gone back into the Referees Association in field. It is a different perspective. The game is much faster. You have to make some challenging decisions, and it all comes down to confidence. And you can only gain confidence through time. But the 2 takeaways from me, it was that Ian shared, is the practice poor comment, where in my notes in preparation for this, I said, you know, a call that doesn't get called in the first but gets cracked down in the third is something that would frustrate me. But they are slowly getting into the game, just like the players are. And then the bank account is a great point. You know, if you're constantly taking and not, I mean, there are people out there that tend to butter them up a little bit too much, and I think we can all see through that. But the ability to wait and, you know, I tend to now make a mark on my board when I could have said something and I didn't, and keep kind of a running total for myself. But working on the coaching side and less about the officials is a great takeaway as well.
Great.
We at our training sessions at our officials clinics, we promote communication to the nth degree as part of a game management techniques. What in the officiating world, it's really difficult to where's that line between too much communication and getting into the coaching realm, where an official should not have said something to a player that could be more doing the coach's job for him. So, I mean, maybe we'll get some comment on that from our coaches on the panel, if that's okay, Russ.
Yeah, well, it's a great segue into the next question. It's perfect. It's basically on escalation, and we'll start with the coaches, we'll end with the referees. When do things escalate from a coach's standpoint, only through your coach goggles? What do you see as the escalation type situations in a game? And then maybe on the flip side, you can talk about how you can head those off. And then when we go to Ian and Lee again, from a referee standpoint, where do things escalate, normally for you? So maybe we'll start with Coach Clark, and then we'll go to Coach Day and Coach Fridge.
The biggest, if I go back to minor lacrosse, when I was coaching minor lacrosse, the biggest issues I had were safety issues. So I wasn't too worried about, whether it was a slashing penalty or a illegal pick or whatever. But at the minor level in particular, it would be safety issues. And if there were safety issues, I found a lot of times, that would be the only time I would challenge officials would be with those. And then it became a lot of times kind of a real defensive wall, and you're challenging my integrity, where that's where you have to have dialogue. I think that's a real big, because when we're coaching minor, we're concerned about our athletes. I mean, we're always concerned about our athletes' safety, but at the younger ages, they're not as developed, they're not as experienced, and they can be in vulnerable positions. So if I'm focusing just on a minor level, I would think whenever there is a question or whether there's an issue of safety, that's where that was the only problems I really ever had escalate in minor lacrosse. And the more with the follow-up, if you got a real dismissive comment or, the hand or don't talk to me, and like, you have to, I think, diffuse some of those things, because there's a lot of emotion when a player gets hurt. When a 10-year-old is laying on the floor, when you see it as an issue of safety, there's got to be dialogue surrounding that. So I think that is if I want to focus specifically on minor lacrosse, that's a real area where communication, dialogue can diffuse a lot of those problems.
Coach Dave?
Pro's a whole other game.
Yeah,
I'll let Paulie talk about that.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with Glenn there, actually. And there's some great, I think Fridge talked about it when, you always see in the NHL with the refs, they make the call and they kind of skate away from the box if they're never near the guy. The same thing when the referees and coaches are having, maybe a dispute. The great thing is there's always two on the floor. Hopefully soon there'll be three refs on the floor, because that's what this game needs. But if the coach is having an issue with one referee, like there's the other ref can come over to diffuse the situation and calm the guy down, or as the kids get older, talk to the captain and say, listen, this is kind of what I saw, just to, that's always that, that other third party that can help calm that down. I think that, again, it just goes to communication and relationship building. And Fridge kind of touched on that, about the positioning and, not coming over the bench or putting their hand up and, giving you the Heisman, and even the great thing in the NLL or junior or senior lacrosse, the refs now are so good at talking to the captain or an older player and saying, hey, this is what I saw, and just have them settle down here before it gets out of hand. I'll talk to them at a TV timeout, whatever. And I think that's it. It's the communication for sure.
Coach Fridge?
Well, just like in the role I have as a principal, I'm held to a higher standard because I've got more power. I think it's a challenging place to be as an official, but they do hold the control of how the game goes. To say I love it would be a bit of an overstatement, but I do like going into a game where it's like two guys are mucking it up and they both go off, and it sets that tone early on about what's going to go. What I get frustrated with is when things get let go and then get out of control, and then it's sort of too late on the repair. But like WLA has that 3-man system. It's going to be a while whether it's Pee Wee and up that gets it or Bantam and up. I think it just gives you that other set of eyes, like that honesty that, oh geez, I didn't actually see that. There are, in field, in box, it doesn't matter. Like there's a whole lot of space you got to cover, and you get distracted for a half second by a comment in the crowd or from the benches. It can make that half second difference. So the suggestion I would have, and it happened years ago, is to somehow bring a coach to a referee's clinic and then a ref to a coach's clinic, just in the same way that Lee and Ian are sharing with us, we're sharing with you. And I think it starts to mend fences for sure.
And hey, Russ, just, for me, when they brought the 3-man system, Clarky, I don't know if you were coaching or playing the league, and I thought, 3-man, it's going to slow the game down. I was like, it speeds the game up, makes the game so much better. And, off air before we start here, I think that is huge for everybody's organization. Yeah, it's going to cost more money. It's going to make the game better. It's going to make it faster. And it's going to make us a lot more referees because, if we could have 2 veteran guys and 2 veteran refs and a younger ref, it's a mentoring and junior B, senior. It's going to be a better game. So I was a guy kind of not really didn't see the 3-man. Now I see it, and it's like it's made the game so much better.
And one of the misconceptions when the 3-man was introduced, that there would be a third more penalties, which is far from the truth.
It's almost like you have another ref saying, like Fridge or Clarky said about the warning. Okay, hey, Paul, easy off ball. It's like it speeds the game up, and there's less penalties, and it's just a faster game. Which it's improved the game so much.
Which you hope, of course, with 3 referees, you de-escalate situations quicker, which of course cuts down on referee abuse. So Ian and Lee, maybe we'll start with Lee and go to Ian. What are some, from a referee's perspective, what are some escalation points that you see from your view on the floor?
I mean, if I would go on here and say I've never missed never missed anything on the floor or on the field, I'd be lying to you. Referees are going to miss calls. Their focus may be on one matchup and something happens off ball in the other matchup. It happens, and it's unfortunate. It's the most gut sinking feeling when you have a player on the floor injured and you don't know how he or she got there. In situations like that, in the first official's timeout, bring the crew together and say, hey, what happened there? Did anybody see that? Yeah, so-and-so twisted an ankle, or no, we missed something. And then just, it's all about damage control from there. If we've missed something, you have to own it as an official. Don't go there and BS your way out of it because you're going to lose. You just have to be better moving forward, and make up for that sort of miss.
Ian, your thoughts on escalation?
Well, I think Glenn mentioned, I think in most areas of lacrosse, the injury or the big hit or the dangerous hit often leads to escalation from everyone, right? The players are all of a sudden really heightened. The coaches are heightened or angry or whatever because they felt somebody was either injured or potentially injured. So those are flashpoints, I think. And I think Lee mentioned a point, and I'm not sure that like those outside the refereeing fraternity would maybe understand this, but he's right in saying there is no worse feeling as a referee than seeing a kid on the floor or on the field and not knowing how he got there. Because you did, like, as a crew, you missed something there, whether it was just a turn of the ankle or a kid blew a knee out, or he got a dirty shot that somebody didn't see. But as a referee, that feels awful. It is a horrible, horrible feeling. And so it's one of the things we talk about all the time about floor coverage and field coverage and who's watching where, and you better not be ball watching because you're going to miss this and things like that. We talk about it all the time. It doesn't mean that, that there's never a mistake made, but that's a good point that Lee brought up. I think as far as escalation goes, I think one of the hardest things, and it kind of leads to this abuse discussion we've been having in our game for a while. I think one of the hardest things that we have to deal with is, like, if Glenn stands up on the boards and he calls me a F and blah, 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 that's easy. Like, almost any ref, even the 14-year-old is gonna call a penalty for that, right? Those ones are easy. The ones that are really hard are the coaches that just are kind of picking at you all game long. And so all of a sudden now at the end of the game, you're kind of done. but it's hard now to give a penalty in the, you know, in a 1-goal game for the coach that's just, you're just done with them now because you didn't give them a penalty early on in the game. So it's one of the things that we've talked as referees over the last number of years about ways that we can try to reduce some of this issue. It's going to sound funny, but for us as senior officials, we often just don't hear that stuff, right? You kind of get a thick hide and you just don't hear it. But I think part of the role we have to play as senior officials is that we need to start penalizing those things a little, the warning coming a little early and the penalty coming a little earlier in the game, so that we don't get to that level where we have a bigger problem later in the game and that we don't necessarily want to throw a penalty then, because now it might have an impact over whether it's a win or a loss. So I think that you know, having that conversation again, communication, but then saying to the coach, hey coach, you know what, we're done with this now. You know, if you have a question about something that I'm calling, that's one thing, but the commentary, the running kind of commentary that's going on every time I go by the bench, that's got to stop. And then if it doesn't, as you said, Fridge, you know, then it's a penalty, and then everybody goes, oh, okay, so then we're not going to be talking to the ref like that all game here. And I think that's a big one. I know for referees, it's hard to walk that line of allowing the discussion and the, you know, the competitive juices to be flowing from a coach, but also maintaining the integrity of the game and not putting yourself in a position that you're allowing, because what you allow is what you teach people how to treat you, right? And so as referees, we need to teach people to treat us a little bit better sometimes. And so sometimes I think we need to throw that flag or throw that arm in the air a little earlier in the game and say, you know what, we're not going down that road today, coach, and I'm sorry about that. So that's sort of where my escalation question is, more of like that slow burn escalation that leads to problems later on.
We see a lot of game reports or incident reports come across my desk that it starts with after several warnings. Well, how many several and how many is too many? So again, to Coach Fridge's point, you know, one warning, and then after that we're a penalty or a foul.
Good. I want to go back to the referees and then we'll circle through to the coach. Actually, we'll start with the coaches. What are some things referees can do to assist coaches? You've touched a little bit on the communication, but I want to be really specific here. You can focus on junior down. Start with you, Coach Clark. What are some things a referee can do to assist a coach in ensuring that relationship stays positive?
I mean, I don't want to keep saying the same thing, but it is communication, rapport, relationship building, and it's things we've all touched on. Dialogue pre-game. Paulie brought up the point that you know, a lot of times, you know, either in junior or senior, or whether it's the NLL, they'll have areas of focus, and they'll say, this is something we're looking for, we're having a lower tolerance for, so there's no surprises with that. And, you know, if it is something like, you know, Paul mentioned in the Mann Cup, they said an off-ball slash, we're not having that, and your guy gets an off-ball slashing penalty. I mean, you shrug your shoulders. You were warned, you were told, you knew ahead of time. So there's not much you can do. So I guess getting ahead of it is probably important, without being too specific. I mean, you can say things to both benches. You know, we're not going to have, you know, we'll have dialogue, but we're not having profanity. We're not having demeaning comments. You know, we're being aware of the you know, the headshots, the off-ball slashing, that. So I think being proactive in communication and establishing sort of a floor and a ceiling of what acceptable behavior is ahead of time can stop a lot of problems as you go along. And once you do that, you got to adhere to it, because if you sort of establish what's going to be acceptable and you don't stay within those guidelines, then, you know, you have a whole other set of problems.
Coach Day, we'll go to you on this. Some things that referees can do it, and you know, outside of communication, maybe in game, some you know, if you were in a referees clinic as a special coach, giving the referee clinic of a bunch of new bantam referees some pointers on how they can assist the game, what would those points be?
I think Clarkey hit it there really good. And I think it's great when, and not just the referees that are coming to do the games, but the, you know, the referee in chief. A lot of times, I guess we're, you know, junior and under, they'll come around and talk to the associations or the coaches kind of to set the tone for what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And again, that's kind of a really great communication. It's not just the refs, the guys and girls you see during the tournament. It's the people that are in charge of the referees, you know, really communicating what their expectations are. And I think that's huge. You know, I think about it's senior, but 2 years ago, I guess 2019, our last real season, you know, we had a lot of pro guys playing in major series lacrosse. And the conversations between the players and the refs were not great in 17 and 18. And 19, right off the bat, guys were getting thrown out. And the refs would say, hey, this is what we're doing, Paul, this year. And I'm like, totally applaud it, boys. Keep it up. We'll tell our guys. No more, like, here's the tone. We're setting a game one. And if you're mouthing, you're getting 5. If you're swearing, you're getting 5. You're getting kicked out. And I think those are huge, is those boundaries. And, you know, obviously with Bantam and ages like that, again, I really think it's a great idea before games that coaches and referees meet and discuss, you know, kind of what the focus is for games, you know, that, you know, maybe it's slashing, whatever is going on at the time, but it's, you know, I think that's at every level, it's so important.
Good. Coach Fridge.
Yeah, I think the in-play stuff that would help me as a coach is that they're talking to them, communicating, like as they're going in for a loose ball, like there's cues, there's mentions that you can do. Certainly I try to do that when I'm officiating. A frustrating thing is just like situational momentum. The 2001 Adnax coming to, after every penalty, a member of the short man would come up and ask the official a question and then slowly make their way back on defense. You know, I've worked with PM out, just those little things that can clean up a game as far as, I mean, I'm not getting into the ticky-tack stuff, but if you truly have momentum going, it's about the game of swings. And if it's in your favor, it's really frustrating for the slowing down of it. And there's definitely things in our rules that are above the officials at the CLA level that we got to change to try to get to some of those points we talked about before.
Good. We'll go to the referees on this, kind of the flip on this now. What kinds of things can the coaches do in game, really focusing on in game here, to assist the referees? Ian, we'll start with you.
Okay. One of the things, I often think that coaches are trying to teach their players to play a certain way. And if we don't call a penalty or don't call a foul or a technical violation for something, we're actually not helping you guys, right? Because you're saying, hey, if you do this, you're going to get a penalty, right? So stop doing that. And if we don't call it, we're actually not helping you, right? So I've actually had coaches, you know, I'll make a call and the kid's coming off the field or the floor and the coach is saying, see, I told you. And it actually, if we have that, if we're doing our job as referees, calling the right calls at the right time, I think it helps the coaches do a better job of being able to explain to their players, hey, this is why you can't do that, because you're going to get caught. You're going to put us in a hole. Now we're man down, and that's a problem, right? So I think from a coach's perspective, them recognizing that that sometimes, and not all coaches do this. I mean, I think the coaches we have on the panel I've been really impressed with the way that they're talking about how they coach their teams, whether they're novice teams or pro teams. But I think not every coach is like that. And the coaches that recognize that sometimes a penalty is a good teaching moment, right? And so when they say that, and sometimes we hear that, it's like, yeah, okay, thanks, coach. That sort of gives me a little bit of backup too, that you're not always saying every single one of my calls is garbage kind of thing. I mean, some of them will be, but not everyone. And so when a coach kind of says that, I find that to be one of those things that puts a little money in that relationship bank where you're like, yeah, thanks, coach. All right, I appreciate that, right? You have my back on that one because it was the right call. Your kid was, high with the hit or whatever, right? So that's one thing I think that coaches, when they choose to do that, and there's lots that do and some that don't, when coaches choose to do that, it really does help us out a fair bit. We hear that.
And the whole piece about the time and opportunity to have a conversation, have a piece of dialogue is key also. I mean, sending a captain over to after a holding call in the first 5 minutes of the first period is probably not an ideal situation, and that would kind of put maybe the officials' ear up, if you will, and save those opportunities for when it counts, when it's a true issue with how the game's being called.
It's kind of been an interesting discussion since the start, because everything is all intermeshed in this discussion, from the original discussion on coaching ethics and, taking some of the off-ball hitting and some of these things out of the game to a 3-man referee system. If you partition one of those things out of the change of the game, it's not going to be effective. And, this is just from my 30,000 foot view on this. And the other thing is getting your provincial sport organizations to buy in, because it's not just a coach versus referee. It's also, we had a comment earlier, it's the league commissioners ensuring that they, have the confidence to back those calls up. It's the referees making sure when they write a game report that it's properly written. Those are all kind of parts of the process. We're going to switch up here. We only have a couple more minutes left. People do have questions. They should put it through. I'm going to ask a really difficult question here. We'll start with the coaches. We'll start with Coach Fridge, then we'll go to Coach Day and Coach Clark. Who is your favorite referee of all time?
Oh, I got a few. I'll go a little farther back to Ronnie Crusato.
And why, Coach Fridge? And why? Okay.
Hall of Famer Ronnie Crusato, by the way.
You were what?
I said Hall of Famer Ron Crusato, by the way.
Fair enough. He was just an honest guy, very personable, would connect with you off the floor. The only guy that kicked me out as a coach and as a player was Todd LeBranche, who's building a bit of a NLL reputation for his sense of humor. Same thing. Like I watched him when he played, and he was getting thrown out and dirty as they come. But again, personality, your ability to interact with them, I think makes a big difference. And besides Lee Brien in today's game, yeah, like there's so many new faces that I haven't got to know, but yeah, I think that's pretty much the crew of people. I mean, the biggest challenge now is trying to get more BC guys into the NLL, and I see that as a process that I hope continues to grow over time, and I think they're trying to aspire to get there too.
Okay, Coach Day, your favorite referee and why?
Well, I'm remiss. I have to talk about my dad. He's 83, still coaching or still refereeing field lacrosse and boxing. He's a great communicator, like really good communicator. He didn't ref me a lot, and it was great when I started junior A. He kind of retired, and then he came back probably about 15, 20 years ago. But I think about the old days. Don Brocky was a great ref. He would tell you how it was. He was almost like a coach. Gary Martin and Mike Cake from our days, Clarkie in Ontario, were two of the best communicators I've ever seen. And now, and really in the NLL, there's been a group in the last 4 or 5 years that have come through, and they get better every year. It's unreal. But yeah, the old school guys, Harry Benham, a bunch of those guys, they were outstanding. They would just tell you how it is. These are the rules. And they might swear the odd time at you, but they were communicators, and unbelievable. As I said before, the refereeing in the game today is better than it's ever been.
Coach Clark, favorite referee and why?
I would agree with Paulie. I'm gonna go back, so I don't offend anyone in today's game, but I do agree with Paulie. I mean, I think, you know, as much as Paulie and I will argue with the guys in the current NLL game, their professionalism, preparedness, and everything is they're outstanding. But Paul took one of my guys. I had one guy in mind, and I was going to say Gary Martin from a long time back. He did junior and senior. Wow, back in the 80s and early 90s, and would have refed Paul and I. But for all the things we talked about, Gary was he was in command. He was just a guy that was difficult to get upset with because you wouldn't always agree with him, but he had just a great kind of calming demeanor and was purposeful when he talked to you. I don't know. It was just one of those guys that seemed to have a handle on personalities he was dealing with. And he also understood the emotion of the game. So he knew players, coaches, you know, at the higher levels would get upset. And he understood that. He understood the competitiveness of it. And he didn't hold a grudge. He wasn't getting upset at you for getting upset. He was almost trying to calm people down. And I enjoyed and respected Gary a lot.
Okay, we're gonna flip this on to the referees now. We'll go to Ian first, and Ian, you can't say me, but favorite coach. I know. Favorite coach to when you're going into a game and you see that this coach is on the bench. Favorite coach, and then why?
That is a tough question. It's a really tough question. Probably in Canada, like at a national level, there's a guy from Ontario by the name of Max Perrin who does a lot of the 18U coaching out there, and I have a huge amount of respect for Max. Every time I do a game of his, he's incredibly knowledgeable of the game, and says nothing to the referee on. Like if he said, but when he does, he's on it, and he usually has a really, really good point. And he's very respectful about the way he brings it up. But you pay attention to him as a referee because you're thinking, holy crap, Max is on my case about something. We got an issue here. So I think it kind of goes back to my point earlier. When somebody's barking all the time, it's hard then the one time that they actually have a really good point, it's hard to pay attention to. But when they just save it for that time where it's really important and they have a really good point to make, it's a lot easier to hear that from them. So Max would be one of my favorite coaches. If I see him on a game, I'm like, okay, this will be a good one.
And Lee, you're not allowed to pick Daren Fridge, but somebody else.
Oh, okay. I crossed his name off. I had three. I think he's on the call here. Internationally, Coach Scott Browning for the work he's done with Hong Kong lacrosse. And locally, one of the most technical savvy coaches I know is Peter Tellis. Coach locally here, major field. I think he knows the rules of the game more than some of our referees, and he uses that to his advantage. And then, and also I had Fridge in there for, whether he's coaching his boy at the youth level or up his involvement with Team BC, right up to when he coached major and currently junior, just the passion he brings to the game. So those were my three.
Perfect. Well, Coach Fridge did make the list.
Good.
There you go. All right. I think we're going to kind of bring this to a close. One of the things I just throw in at the end here is I've started to ref probably the last 5 or 6 years. I cannot believe that there's referees that are reffing the game that haven't played. And I don't say that in a negative way. I would find it incredibly difficult to ref a game of lacrosse if I had never played. And it has really set me back in my seat as a coach at a different level to understand that there's a lot of kids that are out there reffing that don't understand parts of the game that I do. And I just need to have patience. They're going to kind of get that sixth sense about them, because I think, it's a difficult game to coach. It's fast. I more than appreciate it. Last week I said that I was, I found it pretty special to be able to moderate the session, and tonight too, being on a session with all of you great leaders of lacrosse, both referees and coaches, is a real highlight for me to be able to assist. I know Bruce and Dave have both said to thank you all for your time tonight. It's been very enlightening. I think we picked some very strong messages out about, from this leadership group moving forward on how we have to, alter our game to be adaptive moving forward. And a lot of those alterations we talked about in the first hour will assist the referee-coach relationship, which we talked about in the second hour. And that's an unscripted discussion that just kind of happened. So I really appreciate it. Any last words from any of you? I'll give you the floor here for 15 seconds. Coach Clark, anything to add? Last brilliant moments?
No, just really appreciate being on and a lot of value in getting, different viewpoints from different stakeholders in the game at all the different levels and from across different associations. So just a great initiative, Russ.
Coach Day?
As Clark, you said, just appreciate that being able to come on, and these are conversations Clarky and us with guys with Team Canada for probably the last 10 years we've had, and obviously we don't know if people can tell us how we can be more involved and help the game grow. We do it locally. We try to recruit as many kids, but hey, if you guys can say, Clarky, you, Eddie, Derek Keenan, hey, start doing something to make the game better, and for more kids, let us know how to do that, and we'll jump on board.
Coach Fridge?
Just that in the end, we're all people that miss the game. This last full year that we've been without it, the small little snippets don't make up for actually playing the game. So I'm more than happy to come on and talk about this great game, and I feel privileged to get on with the crew that's on tonight. So keep doing these things until we get back to what would be some sense of normalcy, and let's keep growing the game together. Thanks, everybody.
Lee?
No, yeah, great forum, great session. Russ, I might poach your idea for officials, so don't be too hurt. And I again appreciate the invite for this. It was a good time well spent for sure.
And one of my favorite referees, Ian. Last word.
Well, thanks. Echoing everybody else's comments, and this has just been a great discussion. And I think the thing going forward is the message I would send is that idea of partnership between coaches and officials is one that I think we need to grow that mentality of we're in this together. It's not an adversarial, or shouldn't be an adversarial relationship. We're all trying to get to the same goal in the end, which is to grow the game that we love and care about. So thanks for this opportunity.
All right, before people jump off, I'm going to get Dave to put on next week's presentations. Again, really appreciate everybody jumping on tonight. Next week, our first session is with Blaine Manning on under 12 box lacrosse gameplay tips and tricks. We're going to get a little more technical. And then we have Kurt Milosky on after that at 8:30 Eastern time, 5:30 Pacific, with 13 and over box lacrosse tips and tricks. And I'm told that both of them are opening up their entire playbook, so you might want to jump on those calls. They're going to be a total open book. Again, to all the panelists, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. We will be in touch. And to everybody that tuned in tonight, thank you.
Thanks for having us, Russ.